What's going on, guys? John Elder here from codemy.com, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to make this cool friend list app with Ruby on Rails. Alright guys, like I said, in this video, we're going to make this cool friends list app with Ruby on Rails. But before we get started, if you like this video and want to see more like it, be sure to smash the like button below, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, and check out codemy.com where I have dozens of courses with hundreds of videos that teach you to code. Use coupon code YouTube1 to get $30 off membership. That's all my courses, videos, and books for a one-time fee at just $49, which is insanely cheap. Okay, I haven't talked about Ruby on Rails for a very long time. So in this channel, I spent a lot of time on Python-related things. Python, Django, Flask, Kinter, things like that. And what most people don't realize is before I got into Python, I did a lot of Ruby on Rails stuff. I actually wrote 2 #1 best-selling coding books on Ruby and Ruby on Rails, both #1 Amazon bestsellers. This one actually is used, Intro to Ruby Programming Beginner's Guide series is actually used as a college textbook in 2 or 3 different colleges. So that I know of, at least, and maybe more than that, I'm not sure, but very popular books. And I did a lot of Ruby and Ruby on Rails stuff for many, many years, sort of before I really got into Python and just fell in love with that. But that doesn't change the fact that Ruby and Ruby on Rails are great tools that you could do a lot of really cool stuff very easily and very quickly with. Ruby, the programming language, is actually even easier than Python. Python is a very friendly programming language, but Ruby is even friendlier. It's very sort of conversational in nature. There's not a lot of weird punctuation. You just do what you want to do, and it's a lot of fun to use. And I want to spend a little bit more time on this channel, in addition to all the Python stuff, bringing in a lot of Ruby and Ruby on Rails stuff. So in this video, in this next series here, for the next 10 or 15 videos or so, we're going to be building this cool friends list app. And this looks like a very simple app, right? We've just got a list of our friends, first name, last name, their email address, their phone number, their Twitter handles, and we can click on one of them to show it, right? If we want to edit it, we can, make a change or something. When we do that, we get a little message, right? So a very basic app, but it's going to teach us some incredibly powerful concepts. And if you understand these concepts, you can literally make any type of website. I mean, you can make a Facebook website, you can make Twitter, you can make Instagram if you understand these concepts. And specifically, the concepts I'm talking about are CRUD, create, read, update, and destroy. And you can see in our app, we can add a new friend, we can create, C, we can update, so if we want to edit, right? That's U for update. We can destroy if we want to get rid of Bob, yep. Okay, we destroyed him. Create, read, update, and destroy. So yeah, that's CRUD. So think about any website you've ever been to. For instance, Twitter. You can create a Twitter post, a tweet. You can read somebody else's tweet. You can't really update a tweet, but if you're on Facebook, for instance, you could update your Facebook post and you can destroy. You can delete your tweet or your Facebook post or your Instagram post or whatever. Every major website that you can think of mostly deals in CRUD, C-R-U-D, create, read, update, and destroy. And with Ruby on Rails, CRUD is just ridiculously easy, as we're going to find out right now. So yeah, this is a very basic app, but it's going to teach us CRUD, and it's going to teach it to us very quickly and very easily. And once you understand CRUD with Ruby on Rails, you can do anything with it. So I tell people when I talk about Rails that the hardest part of Rails is not creating things with it. The hardest part of Rails is getting Rails installed on your computer. It is notoriously bad. It is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, the worst thing in programming. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never in my life had more frustration than when I tried to install Ruby on Rails on a Windows computer. Now, if you're on a Mac, it's a little bit easier. You could just follow the directions and I'll show you where to find those. But for Windows users, it is just insanely hard. Now, luckily, I've sort of devised a sort of hacky way to do it to where we can get the latest version of Rails and it actually works right out of the box. And it shouldn't take us that long. And that's what we're going to really look at in this first intro video. So like I said, this is what we're going to build. So let's just dive in. I'm on a Windows computer. If you're on a Mac, I'll show you how to do it. We're not going to go through it probably, at least not in this video. Maybe in a future video, I'll install this on a Mac and show you how to do it. But you shouldn't have any problems just following along. So with the Rails instructions. So if you go to Google and just type in Rails guide, you'll come to this guides.rubyonrails.org. Click on getting started here. This is for Mac users, right? If you just want to install this for Mac right here, just go through these instructions. So it's like from there to here, right? This is really all there is. So it's like a page of stuff you got to go through with Mac. And it should just work. It's pretty simple. But with Windows users, it's insanely difficult. So we're talking about several different things here. We need Node, we need Yarn, we need Ruby on Rails itself, we need SQLite 3, the database, we need Ruby, the programming language, and anything else? Probably some other things in there too behind the scenes that we don't even know about. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to go through my sort of unique method for doing this on a Windows computer that, as far as I can tell, works every time. If it doesn't work for you, leave a comment in the comment section below and we'll try and figure it out. But it's actually not that bad. So we can actually look at this page and see some of the things we need. So right off the bat, we need Node and we need Yarn. So chances are you already have Node on your computer. I don't care. Reinstall it anyway. So just right off the bat, let's go to Node. Let's just search Node and it's nodejs.org. Click on, we want this one, recommended for most users, 12.18.3 LTS. Now this is a newer version here. Ignore that, just get this one that's recommended for most users. If this number changes by the time you watch this video, no big deal, just download whatever this one is right here that says recommended for most users. So I'm gonna click this, we can save this anywhere. I'm just gonna save it to my desktop. I've already actually downloaded it in the past, but we can download it again. Now I'm on the Firefox web browser, so up here in the upper right-hand corner, you see this little blue arrow, I can click on it, and right here, I'll click this to open Node. Now if you're in Chrome, it's gonna be down here in the bottom left-hand corner for your downloads. Whatever browser you're using, just find wherever you've downloaded it and double click it. And when you do, this should pop up. So welcome to Node.js setup, click next, accept the terms, click next, just take the defaults for everything, next, 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 and then click this install. Now I've already installed this, so I'm not going to, but you'll go ahead and click the installation button right here. It'll go do its thing and then it should end. Now you're probably gonna want to, let me cancel out of here. You're probably gonna wanna restart your computer after you do that. Go ahead and do that. So that's Node, no big deal, pretty simple. Next we need Yarn. You can see right here, Yarn. So if we come down here, there's a link somewhere for Yarn right here, the Yarn website. So let's open this. And this is classic.yarnpkg, stands for yarn package.com/en/docs/install #Windows-stable. So you can do that or just go to the Rails guide here and click on this link. And you come down here, we want the installer for Windows. So go ahead and click this. And again, save this anywhere. I'm just gonna save it to my desktop and I've already saved it in the past, so it's already sitting there, but I'll save it anyway. And once that's downloaded, again, come up here and click it. When you do, this should pop up. Click next. I've actually got this, so it's asking me if I want to repair it or remove it. It'll probably be different for you. Just select the defaults for everything. Keep clicking next until it finishes installing. I'm going to cancel out of here because I've already installed this, so I don't need this. Okay, so those are basically the things we need, the dependencies. Now, I'm also going to be using the Git Bash Terminal. So we need some sort of terminal that you can type commands on. Now, if you're on Windows, yes, you can use the command prompt or the PowerShell, but they're horrible. Don't use those. Use the Git Bash Terminal. It's completely free. I'm gonna use it, so you might as well use it as well. Just go to git-scm.com/download. And this is the website right here. And so just go ahead and click here to download for Windows. Now, whatever the latest version is, that's fine. If it's a different number by the time you watch this video, just download the latest one. And this will download. Again, we'll save it anywhere, save it to our desktop. I've already got it, so I'll download it again. When it finishes downloading, come up here and click it. Now, this one is a little bit interesting. When you do, this should pop up. This one has like 100, it seems like, installation screens. So we're just gonna click next for all of them. Now it's gonna ask us what text editor we're gonna use. And I'm gonna be using Sublime Text, and it's the one by default. You do not have to come in here and pick if you're using something else like Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code or PyCharm or Atom or anything else, you do not have to find it in this list. Just ignore this and keep clicking next. So next, 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 next. And then finally, it's asking us to install. I've already installed it, so I'm not going to, but you'll go ahead and install that. I'm gonna go ahead and cancel out of there. And once that's installed, you can go to your Windows Start menu and just type in Git, and the little icon will pop up. Click on it, and then this should come up. This is the terminal we're gonna be using. So, we can do some things and type some commands. Ruby on Rails requires some sort of terminal in order to run commands. So this is the one we're gonna use. Mine says codeme at codeme up here. That's because that's what my Windows logged in username is. Yours will be different. Whatever your username is, doesn't matter at all. Just as long as you see this general screen, you're good to go. So we can sort of ignore this for now. We'll come back to this in a little bit. So now the last thing we need is the Sublime Text editor. So I'm gonna go to sublimetext.com. This is the text editor that we're gonna be using. Now, I get it. You probably have a different one that you like. I seem to be the only one in the world that loves Sublime, me and like 60% of all other coders. But every time I make a video about Sublime, someone's always like, I like PyCharm, can I use that? I like Visual Studio Code, can I use that? I'm gonna say right off the bat, no. Just use Sublime and the Git Bash Terminal. You can use those other things, but every single day I get half a dozen to a dozen emails from students that have problems with PyCharm or Visual Studio Code, right? If you know what you're doing, they're fine. If you're a beginner, you're gonna come across errors, and I don't use those tools, so I can't help you. If you come across an error using Sublime and Git Bash, I can help you because those are the tools I'm using. So I suggest in this video just to follow along and use the tools that I'm using. They're free, they take 2 minutes to download and install, you might as well. If later on you wanna use PyCharm or Visual Studio Code, knock yourself out, but while you're learning and while we're doing this course, just use the tools that I'm using. It'll make your life a lot easier, especially if you're newer at this and don't necessarily know how to debug different errors that Visual Studio Code or PyCharm might throw up. And people always say, well, what difference does it make? It makes a difference. Those tools are different. They act differently. The commands are different sometimes, and they have errors that Sublime and Git Bash won't have. So just sort of keep that in mind. Like I said, whatever floats your boat, but I'm going to suggest you use these tools. They're free, both of them, So go ahead and click download for Windows. Again, save this anywhere. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. I've already downloaded it in the past, so it's click yes. And when it finishes downloading, go ahead and click it. When you do, this should pop up. Click next, and then click install. Now I've already installed it, so I don't need to do this again. So I'll cancel out of here. But you'll go ahead and finish it, and then that's that. Okay, so we've got sort of all the precursors that we need. So we've got let's see, we've got Node, we've got Yarn, we don't have SQLite, and we don't have Ruby, but we're gonna use something called the Rails installer, which is a standalone little package that we can download that will install Rails itself and SQLite and some other things that we're gonna need. Now, the problem with it is that it's outdated. So let's just head over here, go to Google and type in Rails installer. And it's this one right here, railsinstaller.org. And if we scroll down here, we can see it uses Ruby 2.3.3, which is an older version of Ruby. I think we're on 2.3.6 or 2.6 or I don't know, something like that now. It's definitely down the line from 2.3.3. And you see we're also using Rails 5.1. Now, Rails is on version 6 at the moment, which is an entire version number different than 5. So it's a major update from 5. So it's very different than 5. So we don't want to use Rails 5. I mean, you can, but the problem is the Rails 5 that comes with this has problems. It doesn't install right for a lot of people. You get a SQLite error. There's all kinds of hassles involved. So we really don't want to use Rails 5 or Ruby 2.3. So what we're going to do is download it. It will install all the other things that we need, right? Then we'll download the latest version of Ruby, which will overwrite this 2.3. Then we'll upgrade to the latest version of Rails, right? So this process has to be done in the exact order that I'm doing it now. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and download this one. Make sure it's this one right here that says 5.1, not this one. These are for Mac. You can just ignore those. So before we do this, I'm going to wipe Ruby and Ruby on Rails from my computer. So I'm going to pause the video and do that really quickly. All right, so I've wiped Ruby on Rails and Ruby from my system. So now we can sort of download this fresh and you can follow along with me. So head down here, click on this little button right here to download this. Save it anywhere. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. It already exists. Oh yeah, let's go ahead and replace it. And this is pretty big, 112 megabytes. But now we can click here to open it and accept the license. Make sure these are all checked, install. Okay, so this is gonna take just a minute or so to install. And let me tell you again, sort of how we're gonna be doing this. We're gonna install this. Now this is going to install an older version of Ruby, like I said, and an older version of Rails, like I said. Then after we install this, we're gonna go install Ruby, which will install the latest version, and it will sort of just update the old version to the new version. So we'll be good there. Once we do that, we can then upgrade our Rails version to the latest version, and it should just work. So if you do those steps out of order, this is not gonna work. You have to do them in order. And make sure you've already got Yarn and you've already got Node on your computer. So, okay, we've got this. We can click here to finish. We get this other screen that pops up. It's doing some Git stuff. We don't really care. Click X, type in exit to get out of there. So, okay, that should have worked. And let's head over to our terminal really quickly. Now, you got to close the old one we just opened because we've installed Rails. And so we have to restart the Git Bash Terminal. So go to your Windows Start menu. You can't see it because it's on my other monitor. Just type in GIT. The icon will pop up. Go ahead and click it. When you do, this should pop up. Now we can type in Rails-V. Now that's the lowercase v. And you can see Rails 5.1.3. If we head back to this website, we can see 5.1. That's what we just installed. We can also check to see what version of Ruby we're running. So Ruby-V. And you can see Ruby 2.3.3, which is 2.3.3. Now we can also check Yarn. So Yarn-V. Let's make sure we've got that. We can check Node-V, so we're good to go there. So, all right, so far so good. We've got all the things. Now we need to update Ruby. So let's head over here and let's go to, I'm just gonna type in Ruby into Google, and it's not Ruby Lang, it's this, we want this Ruby installer. So it's rubyinstaller.org, and this will install Ruby using a sort of a Windows installer. And you can see, we click on downloads, there's this whole long list of different Rubies we want. The one that's sort of the most current version, or the one they suggest, is always in bold. So we can click here to download it. Go ahead and save it anywhere. I'm just going to save it on my desktop. Click save. I've already got it installed, but I'll do it again. Or I've already got it downloaded, but I'll download it again. So once this is downloaded, we can click here and install it. And when we do, this pops up. So accept the license, click next, make sure all these things are checked. Click install. Now we want both of these things to be checked, because we want to download the development toolchain as well. And this is going to do its thing. Now, if we come over here and look, you can see Ruby can be updated to the latest patch version by running this new installer. So even though we have an old version of Ruby sort of installed on our computer that came with the Rails installer, we don't have to do anything with it. This will sort of update it automatically. It'll take care of the old version. A lot of times with programming languages, you have to uninstall the old version before we can install the new version. Not so here. This should just take care of it. So this is going through here and doing its thing. Should just take a minute or so. So maybe I'll pause the video, or maybe it'll just sort of finish here in 10 seconds or so. 9, 8. Okay, so make sure this little box is checked because we want to run this development toolchain installation thing, which is a DOS thing. So we can click finish. And when we do, this thing pops up. It's this sort of command DOS prompt looking thing. And you have 3 options. We could just hit enter and it will go through and do its thing. Shouldn't take but a second. And okay, so then it's done. So it's asking us again to pick one of those things. I'll just hit enter again and the thing disappears. So now we want to, let's see, if we go Ruby-V, it's going to tell us the old version. We need to close this Git Bash terminal and restart it like we always have to do when we install something new. So now we can type in Ruby-V, and now it's 2.6.6, which if we look here at the website, 2.6.6, Ruby has been updated successfully. Now, the real test is we can type in Rails.v, and let's see, it's not even showing anything for Rails, which is kind of weird since we did install using the Rails installer, the old version of Rails. But for whatever reason, it can't find it. So now we need to update our version of Rails. So to do that, we just type in gem install Rails. Now, I just hit enter and nothing seems to be happening. It looks like it's just sort of stalled. And this is common. It's probably downloading Rails in the background or something, and there's no little prompt to tell you that it's doing that. So we just kind of have to wait here. So this sometimes takes 10 seconds. Sometimes it takes 2 seconds. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes. It just sort of depends on how Rails is acting at the moment and how the installation of the gem is. And if you're not familiar with a gem, everything in Ruby is gem based. So like, think with Python, when you install something, you use pip, the Python installation program, to download packages. It's sort of like that with gems, but a gem is like a package in Ruby. Gems are the little programs that we install for Ruby. So they're just called gems. You know, it's Ruby, gem, you know, it's a whole theme there. So gem install Rails, we're going to install the Rails gem, I guess, which is all Rails actually is, just a big gem basically. So I'll probably go ahead and pause the video until this finishes doing its thing. It looks like it wants to take a long time today for some reason. So we'll just go ahead and pause it and pick it back up in just a second when it finishes doing its thing. Okay, and then boom, all of a sudden it just spit out a whole bunch of stuff. If we come back here, successfully installed concurrent Ruby 1.1.7, not sure what that's all about. Heads up, changes the fallback. If you're upgrading, I just sort of usually ignore all this stuff. And then it installed all of this stuff. Like this is just pages and pages of stuff that it installed. Now that's the thing about Ruby on Rails. There is just an insane amount of stuff that comes with it. You know, when you install Django, you install like a couple of things. Django, a time zone file, a SQLite database, and that's basically it, right? Rails comes with just a bunch of stuff, which is why installing it is so hard. All of these things require different dependencies. If some of the dependencies are out of date, or if your computer's out of date, or if you have an old version of Node or something on your computer that can conflict with any of these things, you can have errors. So that's why Rails is so hard to install, at least in my opinion. So now we can come down here and type Rails-V, and we see we're on the latest version 6.0.3.3, and we're good to go. So now it's really the moment of truth to see whether or not all of this madness worked and Ruby on Rails is actually installed and working correctly. So we need to create a project and run a server to see if it all installed correctly. So let's create a directory on our computer where we're going to house our new project. So to do that, we type in mkdir, stands for make directory. And I want to put this in my C drive, and let's call this Rails friends, because we're going to make a friends list. So I'll call it Rails friends. Now we can cd or change directory into that directory by typing cd space /c/ Rails friends. And you can see now we're in this directory, right? See it right there. If we type in ls to list the stuff in this directory, there's nothing in there. So now we want to create our new Rails project. So to do that, we just type in Rails new, and then we name the project. So I'm going to call this friends. We're creating a friends list. I'm just going to call it friends. Makes sense. Hit enter, and boom, it's installing all kinds of stuff, downloading stuff, dependencies, more files, more programs, more craziness. All right, this is all going into Rails, and it's just madness, but this is what Rails is all about. So hopefully we won't get any errors. Chances are you will get an error, but hopefully we won't. So let's just see. Fetching Puma, that's the web server. Now, usually where you run into troubles is with SQLite 3. SQLite 3 is the default lightweight database that comes with Rails. It comes with Django too, but Django doesn't seem to have any problems with it. Rails always has problems with SQLite 3, and we're going to find out whether or not we have that in just a second when it installs it. We'll get an error if we have problems. If we don't have an error, there won't be any problems. And hopefully, let's see. Coming down to the S's now. Selenium, SQLite 3. Installing SQLite 3 1.4.2 with native extensions. Fingers crossed, this is where it's gonna throw an error if it's gonna throw an error. So I've done this many times. Half the times it works, half the time it doesn't. There's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's one of the frustrating things about Ruby on Rails, at least in my opinion. I've never once in my life when installing Django had to hold my breath and go, oh, I hope it works this time. But every time I install Rails, you do, oh, no errors. Okay, so we flew right past that. It looks like we're good to go. So this should finish up here in just a second. And when it does, ooh, look at that. Now, Webpacker is another thing that's sort of new. I think in version 6 is when Webpacker came around. So sometimes you'll get errors when you install that as well, but it looks like it's flying through there with no problems. It looks like there's problems because all this stuff is coming up, but unless it's like angry red text, usually you're okay. Okay, so resolving, finishing, come on, fingers crossed, boom, Webpacker successfully installed, and we're good to go. So now if we clear the screen, type in ls, we see there's this new friends directory, and we need to move into that directory. So let's go cd friends, and we see now it says master. This is now a master branch of Git. Git, the version control software, has been installed. When we installed the Rails installer, it installed Git for us, and it's already configured it and set everything up. So that's good. Now if we type in ls, we see there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So now we can open up Sublime if we want. So go to your Windows Start menu, type in Sublime, click the icon, this should pop up. So this is a blank Sublime thing. We can now go to Project and add folder to Project. And when we do, this pops up, navigate to your C drive and find that Rails friends directory that we just created, and then single click on friends and then click select folder. And when you do, boom, all these files pop up. So here's our gem file. We'll talk about all this stuff later, but this is now where we're going to be working for the rest of this course. So if you notice all of these things, app, log, db, config, come back over here to our terminal, that's all of these things, app, log, db, let's see, there's our gem file, etc. So we're on the right track here. So now this is the final moment of truth. Whether or not this was installed correctly, we're going to run the server and see. So to run the server, you just type in Rails S. S stands for server. When we do, hopefully the server will turn on the Puma web server. There it is, booting Puma. Everything looks okay. Yes. So now we can see right here, it's telling us where we can look to see if the server's running. So head over to the web browser and type in localhost :3000. 3000 is the port that Rails runs on, the Rails server. And boom, we see this thing. It says Rails version 6.0.33, Ruby version 2.6. Yay, you're on Rails. If you get this little starter screen, it means everything worked. You can breathe a sigh of relief. We've got Rails installed. We've created a project. Everything is working and we're good to go. So, man, that seemed like a lot, and it was. Rails, like I say, is just the hardest thing in programming to install. I have been doing this for 30 years. I started programming when I was 8 years old. I'm 42, so 34 years? In all that time, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in programming. Day in and day out, installing Rails on a Windows computer. It's so frustrating, and I have no idea why. I used to live in Chicago. The Rails guys are from Chicago. I guess they're Mac guys, and they just never really cared enough to make it work really well and easily on Windows. I don't know. But for whatever reason, this is a hassle. But I think this way is a pretty good way, and I've been using this way for a while to get Rails running. And that way is download the Rails installer. Even though it's outdated with an old version of Rails, it will download and install the dependencies that you need, like SQLite 3 and some other things, right? Once you get that, then download the latest version of Ruby. That will overwrite the outdated version of Ruby that's in the Rails installer. Then you can upgrade Rails to 6.03 using the gem install Rails command that we did. And that should do the trick. So at least for now, in sort of the end of 2020, this works, right? This might not work next month, but it works now. And so this is what I suggest. So that's all for this video. We're going to, in the next video, start building out this app. Like I said, it should take, I don't know, a couple of weeks worth of videos, 10, 15, 20, whatever it takes in order to build this thing out. It shouldn't take that long to do it, but I want to spend a lot of time really explaining the different parts of Rails and really getting into like how to do CRUD and stuff. It's really easy, but there's some things we need to look at in there, and it should be a lot of fun. So that's all for this video. If you like it, be sure to smash the like button below, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, and check out codemy.com where you can use coupon code YouTube1 to get $30 off membership. So I pay just $49 to access all my courses, over 45 courses, hundreds of videos, and the PDFs of all my best-selling coding books. I'm doing over 100,000 students learning to code just like you. My name is John Elder from codemy.com, and I'll see you in the next video.